Okay, so I closed having read this portion to you, and also note that even if I'm making this distinction that there's the environmental concern whereby we're showing that the coronavirus also has the element of being a zoonotic disease and having to do with the population control, population um, issue of encroachment on wild habitats and the involvement with wild animals in terms of the naturally occurring virus. So in other words, even beyond this issue of overpopulation, there still is tied within that a similar issue as up here in that the coronavirus is natural in and of itself. So there's that environmental component. And then likewise, how it is that we're managing our body, and likewise our involvement with other people also has the connection to our environment. So as I pointed out, there's a video that I made last spring on Garrett Hardin's paper. Then also, let's go ahead and look at these arguments. So this argument is one of the arguments that you're looking at here by way of what we'll be writing about in our, what we'll be discussing in our Zoom meeting and then writing about. But know too that when you write about it, you're not presenting it in this formal, as a formal argument, okay? There's no need to do that. I only have it presented as an argument for the sake of summarizing the points, okay? So then let's just look at this. The premise one is the COVID-19 pandemic has caused an economic crisis whereby we are shutting down and compromising businesses, thus forcing millions of people to be furloughed and laid off. Then premise two is public health decision to take this step is in the name of flattening the curve, thus preventing the spread of the virus to a percentage of the vulnerable population who might contract the virus and those who will die from it. Okay. Then premise three, a segment of the population, and please note this is not my view, somewhat controversial here, what I'm pointing out, feels that the business closures and economic slowdown is an overreaction because the percentage of people who will need to be hospitalized and who will die is worth the risky sacrifice for the health of the economy. Okay. Then conclusion, therefore, the public health measures we have taken to flatten the curve of COVID-19 infection and mortality has caused an economic shutdown that has brought a few out of work and furloughed people to the conclusion that the shutdown is a bit of an overreaction, or shutdowns, etc., closing businesses and restricting public participation, etc. That the sacrifice of the vulnerable and the few is worth the restarting the businesses for the most. Okay, so again, please note this is not my view. So I bring this as an argument to perhaps suggest that this argument is straying from the good. And then so the question is, how is it straying from the good by way of deontology, for example? So if you're writing about deontology, so you're choosing one of these theories down here and showing how these two arguments are straying from the good by way of deontology. So when you include deontology, you go down here and you make sure that when you write about how that's working, how is it that this is straying from the good by way of deontology, your answers must hit these criteria points or avoid this criteria point here in terms of your grammar, etc. So that is that argument. So let's look at Hardin's argument really quick. So premise, Hardin's neo-Malthusian perspective, presupposes that the tragic exponential growth of the population will outstrip the finite arithmetically quantified resources common to all on planet Earth. Premise 2, for Hardin, we need to rethink our conscientiousness that is at the heart of our overpopulation problems, economically and ecologically. His is the view that public welfare programs enable vulnerable people to overpopulate and outstrip finite resources, i.e. the commons, for those who are conscientiously not overpopulating. And please note, this is not my view, okay? Premise 3, for Hardin, the way in which the commons are distributed is not sustainable if we do not privatize and impose government redistribution apart from the appeals of conscientiousness, and we must all be coerced into doing so, and everyone will not do this voluntarily, according to Hardin. We need to be coerced. Yeah, so we need to be coerced. So therefore, for Hardin, we should rethink the tragedy of the commons to bring about a reevaluation of conscientiousness in our public welfare programs that enable a depletion of the finite economic and ecological resources of planet Earth, the commons. So conscientiousness and the inevitability of overpopulation need to be mutually exclusive, with Hardin's interest for those who conscientiously do not overpopulate. Everyone, including vulnerable poor people, needs to be involuntarily coerced into not overpopulating. So, and then again, please note, this is not my view. So I don't have it here, but when you are writing about this, I don't have it in these instructions, but I will now include, after I've read these, a question on how these are connected. So how these two arguments are linked. There's a link here, and I want you to tell me what that is, okay? And I'm going to have a question on that here, okay? So really what you're doing is you're picking one theory and showing how that one theory is a way toward the good by way of showing how these arguments are straying away from the good. So these arguments seem to be straying away from the good. How is it that you could argue in counter to these two arguments, how it is that by way of deontology, you can then angle these arguments so that you are aimed toward goodness, right? So what is it about these arguments that is straying away from the good by way of deontology? So you want to show how that is goodness that is aimed for away from the problems that these arguments have. Okay, so I think that should take us to the end of this screencast, and I'll talk to you later.